Since taking office, President-elect Donald Trump has wasted no time fulfilling his campaign promises, initiating mass deportations of illegal immigrants, and officially declaring war on drug cartels. He issued an executive order designating Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, FTOs. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth formally announced that following President Trump's bold decision to classify Mexican drug cartels as terrorist organizations, the U.S. military has been authorized to conduct special operations against them. All options are on the table. Meanwhile, over 15,000 U.S. Marines have been deployed to the U.S.-Mexico border, marking just the beginning, with plans to significantly increase troop numbers in the future. For years, the rampant drug epidemic in the United States, particularly fentanyl, has claimed hundreds of thousands of lives annually due to overdoses. Statistics show that the U.S., accounting for about 12% of the global population addicted to drugs, consumes 80% of the world's opioid supply. Drug abuse has become a major public health challenge. The roots of the U.S. drug crisis trace back to the early 20th century, but it worsened dramatically in the 1980s. At that time, intensified U.S. efforts to crack down on Colombian drug smuggling forced groups like the Medellin and Cali cartels to reroute their operations through Mexico, turning it into a key transit hub for the U.S. drug market. By the 21st century, Mexican cartels not only transported drugs, but also began producing them, especially methamphetamine, meth, and fentanyl. Today, Mexico is a critical node in the global illegal drug trade, exporting marijuana, heroin, meth, and fentanyl to the U.S., while serving as a vital conduit for South American cocaine into North America. Sharing a 3,000-kilometer border with the U.S., Mexico's geographic proximity makes it a natural smuggling corridor. The enormous U.S. demand for drugs, particularly opioids, provides a lucrative market for these cartels. In economically disadvantaged regions of Mexico with high unemployment, drug trafficking offers a fast track to wealth. Cartels bribe officials, police and even military personnel, deeply infiltrating government institutions and severely undermining law enforcement. For instance, the 2019 Ovidio Guzman incident, the capture and subsequent release of El Chapo's son due to cartel retaliation, exposed the impotence of local authorities and security forces. Currently, Mexico's drug cartels, such as the Sinaloa Cartel, Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, and Los Zetas, are highly organized, boasting well-armed paramilitary units and private militias. Beyond vying for drug trafficking routes, they diversify their revenue through kidnapping, extortion, and human trafficking. Intercartel warfare has fueled a surge in violent incidents. Although the U.S. has launched multiple war on drugs campaigns to reduce supply, these efforts have inadvertently fueled the expansion of Mexico's drug economy. Persistent U.S. demand, coupled with supply-side crackdowns, has driven cartels to adapt, producing more potent, easier to transport, and higher-profit drugs like fentanyl. According to the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, by the early 2020s, over 90% of the fentanyl in the U.S. market originated from Mexico, a trend likely to intensify by 2025. The fentanyl crisis. The fentanyl crisis is the most severe and deadly facet of the global drug problem in recent years, particularly in North America. It involves the illegal production, trafficking, and abuse of fentanyl, a synthetic opioid 5,100 times more potent than morphine and 50 times stronger than heroin. Originally developed by pharmaceutical companies for medical use, e.g., pain management for cancer patients or surgical anesthesia, illegally manufactured fentanyl is sold as powder, pills, or mixed into other drugs like heroin or cocaine. Due to its extreme potency, even trace amounts can be lethal. Fentanyl's production is relatively low-tech and inexpensive, requiring only small labs and chemical precursors. Its compact size makes it easy to smuggle. Just a few grams can meet massive demand. Highly addictive, it quickly leads to dependency and repeated use. Fentanyl's precursor chemicals, e.g. EDS, NPP, and 4-ANPP, primarily originate from China. Although China tightened regulations in 2019, underground markets have shifted supply chains through countries like India. Mexican cartels such as Sinaloa and CJNG use these precursors to mass-produce fentanyl in local labs, smuggling it across the U.S. border. The profit margins are staggering. A single kilogram of raw material can yield millions of dollars, incentivizing cartels to ramp up production. According to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP data, the southern border is the primary entry point for drugs into the U.S., via both legal ports of entry and informal routes between them. 2021, CBP seized approximately 11,200 pounds of fentanyl at the southern border. 2022, seizures rose to 14,700 pounds. 2023, fiscal year, Fentanyl seizures surged to 27,000 pounds. As of September last year, seizures dropped to 13,900 pounds, though the situation remains dire. Cartel activities are also closely tied to violent crime, murders, kidnappings, and gun offenses, especially along the U.S.-Mexico border, destabilizing communities and straining law enforcement. Beyond devastating users' health, the drug crisis leads to workforce loss, skyrocketing healthcare costs, and increased burdens on social welfare systems, indirectly harming the national economy. Trump's approach. The Trump administration views Mexican cartels as the primary source of deadly drugs flooding the U.S. Recent investigations reveal that groups like the Sinaloa Cartel and CJNG engage not only in drug trafficking but also in violence, human trafficking, and arms smuggling, operations strikingly similar to those of traditional terrorist organizations. These include controlling regions through fear and violence and undermining societal stability, aligning with the U.S. State Department's definition of an FTO, a foreign entity engaging in terrorism that threatens U.S. citizens or national security. By designating cartels as FTOs, Trump enables the U.S. government to deploy tougher legal and military measures, moving beyond traditional law enforcement tactics. Compared to the Biden administration's perceived lenient border policies, Trump's approach is markedly more aggressive. From day one, Trump has unleashed a full-scale assault on cartels, including military intervention. We will show no mercy to these drug cartels. Deploy all necessary military resources, including the U.S. Navy, to impose a comprehensive maritime embargo on drug cartels. Ensure the Western Hemisphere's waters are not used to illegally traffic drugs into our country. Order the Department of Defense to appropriately use special forces for cyber warfare and other overt and covert operations to maximize disruption of cartel leadership, infrastructure, and operations. Designate major drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. Cut off their access to the global financial system. Secure full cooperation from other governments to stop the cartels, or we will expose every bribe, kickback, payoff, and act of corruption that sustains their brutal reign. Urge Congress to pass legislation ensuring drug smugglers and human traffickers face the death penalty. As long as I'm back in the White House, drug lords and dealers will never sleep soundly again. Concurrently, the Trump administration is advancing border wall construction and planning to deport over 20 million illegal immigrants to dismantle the cartel's domestic networks. New Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has affirmed that the Pentagon will support all deportation and border security efforts. U.S. military intelligence aircraft are currently gathering data on cartels over Mexican airspace. The Department of Defense will take all necessary measures to support the detention and deportation of illegal entrants. Hegseth also joined Border Czar Tom Homan at the southern border to meet and encourage stationed U.S. troops. Just 20 days into Trump's presidency, White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller reported on southern border progress. Since you signed the executive order on day one, border crossings have dropped by about 95%. The drug cartels are extremely frustrated, as they've never faced such severe measures. Of course, eradicating drug cartels entirely requires more than unilateral U.S. action. It demands full cooperation from neighboring governments. The imposition of 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada starting March 4 suggests that current progress falls short of Trump's expectations, hinting at ongoing negotiations and geopolitical maneuvering. Nonetheless, with Trump's resolve, America's economic might, and widespread public support, completely dismantling the cartels and eliminating the severe harm drugs inflict on public health may only be a matter of time, though the road ahead remains long. We'll be watching closely. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.